Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Hold My Flashlight. I'm Jasper, your host, and listen as I share your personal experiences of true crime, paranormal, and the unexplainable. Our first story was given to me by Reddit user Mad as a Wizard, where he shares his experience of his stepfather trying to kill him. My mother's husband got home drunk and tried to kill me 3 times in the same day. I was only 12 years old at the time, but we got into a fist fight. He pulled out a knife on me. I ran and he chased me down with his car. Thankfully, by pure chance, my uncle was going to my house at that moment, saw what was happening without thinking twice, slammed his Dodge Ram into my stepfather's car. If he hadn't showed up, I would probably be dead by now. Funny thing is, my mother is still married to that asshole. Well, to start it all, he already had a drinking problem for years. At the time, every time he drank, he would cause some form of commotion. But I never knew exactly what it was because my mother would just lock me in my room when she realized the shit was about to happen. This time, however, my mother was pregnant with my brother and she had some difficulties just simply moving around the house. So she simply asked me to go to my room, which I did, but I stood behind the door listening to what was happening. I heard him get home and go straight to the kitchen, where he threw pots around and complained about the food we had that day. Just his usual behavior. Up until this day, I don't know if what he did next was the first time it had happened, or if it was something unusual. But he went to my mother's room, called her names for not preparing a proper meal, and complained about me, saying that I was a spoiled kid that should be working to help with the bills. Now remember, I was 12 years old at the time this all happened, but he started beating her. Without thinking twice, I went running to my mother's room and pushed him away from her. He was a small guy and I was always a big kid, so the height difference wasn't big at all, but still, I think I will always remember the time I got punched in the face by an adult. Soon, we started rolling on the floor, throwing punches at each other when he managed to grab me by the throat and say that he was going to finally kill me. After a lot of struggle, me and my mother managed to get him away from me. He then went calmly to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and started coming back to the room we're at. My mother gave me her cell phone to call the police and begged me to jump out the window and run. I did as she asked and started running, with nothing on but ripped shorts and the remains of what was a shirt. As soon as I reached the corner of the street, I heard him turning his car on. He drove an old Ford Verona, so it literally sounded like a monster was chasing me. I don't recall actually calling the police, but there was a call on my mother's phone afterwards, so I guess I did, but everything in these moments I was running is a blur in my memory. At the time, I was certain my mother was killed and I would be too. I remember taking some unexpected turns in an attempt to lose him, but it ended up returning to the same street I lived, but further ahead. I didn't even see my uncle's Ram going up the street, but he saw me, and I imagine he assumed exactly what was going on from my stepfather's history. And I just heard the loud noise behind me and didn't even look back. Just kept running till I reached my grandmother's house, which was about 2.5 kilometers away. After getting there, We called my aunt and found out that my uncle saw what was happening and held the guy there till the police arrived. I imagine he beat him up, but I didn't see that. And thankfully my mother was alive and well as my unborn brother. Apparently, she managed to lock the door right after I left and he saw me leaving, so he didn't even think twice before chasing me. Our next story is a short but very sweet little ghost story from Reddit user introvertforeverr, titled, I Heard My Brother's Voice After He Died. So last year, during lockdown, my brother died. I had recently had a baby that he hadn't met yet. In the last conversation I had with him, he told me he couldn't wait to meet my daughter. One night, myself and my partner were in bed, and it was around 1 a.m., and we were talking and getting ready to go to sleep. We suddenly heard a man's voice outside the window, shouting my baby daughter's name over and over. The voice sounded like my brother's, but there was no way he would come around to see us at that time. We both jumped up to look outside and nobody was there. We were a little freaked out and couldn't sleep after that. But about an hour later we got a phone call saying that they'd found my brother dead in his flat and it looked like he'd been dead for several days. To this day, both myself and my partner believe it must have been my brother coming to say hello to my daughter that he didn't get to meet yet. Our next story comes from Reddit user Overall Resolve 4490, titled Weird Happenings. I've been diving into high strangeness since I was little, but last year I read John Keel's Eighth Tower and my whole perspective changed. For the past 3 months or so, I've been pretty absorbed by all things strange. In the past, I was more focused on UFOs, alternate history, and consciousness, and I've never been one to look into hauntings. But after reading Keel, I've started watching videos of stories and browsing relevant subreddits. It's become an interest of mine, but I will say that I have no desire to experience any ghosts or poltergeist activity. So last night I was working outside on the patio while my girlfriend was at work. I had one of her dogs, a Pyrenees, outside with me, and her other dog was inside with my two. It was about 7 p.m. when I heard her pull up and lock the car. The dogs inside started doing what they normally do when she comes home, and one of my dogs came to the patio door wagging her tail and telling me to come inside to say hi. Since I was working and couldn't leave right then, I was going to wait for her on the patio. I heard the front door open and shut, the normal front door closing sound, where the whole house shakes a little. And then my dog ran back towards the front door to get my girlfriend, and then ran back to the patio door in the kitchen and was excitedly whining. Soon after, my dog inside and the Pyrenees outside both started looking towards the laundry room attached to the kitchen. The lights were off in the kitchen and the laundry room, so I turned them on with my phone. Nothing in the kitchen or laundry room, no cats, dogs, or girlfriend. Still, the Pyrenees stood and stared towards the same spot for at least 30 seconds. While all of this is happening, I'm kind of annoyed. She didn't tell me she'd be home early, even though I was just texting with her, and I was in the middle of work and hadn't tidied up before she got back. So, my heart rate and blood pressure was elevated because of the surprise and stress. once I realized she didn't come home, I was scared someone else had gone into the house. I heard the flipping door shut. My house shook. The dogs heard it all, too. But after I checked my security logs, it was clear none of the doors had been opened and no one else was at my house. I tried to tell my girlfriend about it, but it scared her and she forced me to explain it away. I said maybe it was a subwoofer in someone's car that shook the house. But I'm 100% positive that's not what it was. It's also worth noting that my driveway isn't near any others, and no one lives in the house closest to mine. I have zero reasonable explanation for this, honestly. I almost forgot about it, but figured I'd go ahead and write it down. Our next story is a short, glitchy interaction between a mother and daughter from Reddit user TimeLuckBug titled, "My Mom and Sister Heard the Other on Different Days." My sister walked out of her room, looked down from the top of the stairs and said, "What? Mom?" "She's not home," I laughed. "I thought I heard her come in from the laundry room door." I seriously joked. "Just watch, Mom will come through that door and ask for you now." She laughs. About 7 to 10 days later, our mom goes out to the garage and comes back through the laundry room and, yes, you guessed it, she looks up at the stairs and says, "Steph?" I am in the same spot I was before and I gasped. I say, "She isn't home." "I thought I heard her upstairs and call me." "Wow, this is crazy. She did the same thing last week but was upstairs thinking you came in that door and I joked about it." "Really?" They've had similar moments, but not so clearly or in front of me. Also, weird how accurate my joke was. There have been times where we think we heard the other making noise, but these two actually heard words and I was amazed. Our final story comes from Reddit user Sequoia23, which I may be mispronouncing that name, so I apologize. And their story is titled, "I've had my one good scare this Halloween season." This is going to be a pretty tame story compared to a lot of the great ones I've read, but since it happened to me, I think it's pretty spooky. I'm definitely buying a doorbell camera ASAP after this. I'm writing this only a few hours after everything happened, now that I've calmed down and the sun is coming up, and I feel somewhat safer. Last night, I was laying in bed, reading a little before I went to sleep. I think it's important to clarify that I live on the outskirts of town. Still in town, but definitely on the edge, off the highway that leads out of town and into about a 15-mile long stretch of lots of country, woods, fields, and a few residences, but mostly open highways. So, other than the other tenants in my actual apartment building, it's normally very quiet in my area. My building is a square with 4 apartments, and for each of us, our door simply faces out into the open. There's no lobby or foyer or anything. My door in particular looks out into a large field that goes up a hill. I don't remember the exact time, but sometime between 1 and 2 a.m., someone randomly started banging on my door, which freaks me out at the best of times in broad daylight, but especially in the middle of the night. I nervously went to ask who it was, and this guy with a deep voice claimed he was a police officer and that I needed to let him in. That's what he said. I needed to let him in. Not that I needed to open the door. Luckily, I watched and listened to a lot of true crime stuff, so I got pretty suspicious real quick. I just got near instant alarm bells because he couldn't tell me why I needed to let him in, or what I supposedly did, and he never asked what my name was. He also didn't really sound like a cop, if you know what I mean. Obviously, I was feeling creeped out, so I called 911 to confirm that there was actually an officer at my address, and they said there wasn't. At this point, I'm freaking out, and I kind of call out through the door that I'm on the phone with the police, and the guy just kind of bangs on my door one more time, then stops making noise. I presume because he ran off at this point. They dispatched 2 cars to my apartment, and the officers took a good look around. Unfortunately, the guy was long gone by the time they got there, and I never saw him, so I don't have a description of him or anything. But the cops said 2 things that make me feel better. 1, they'd post more patrols in my area over the Halloween weekend. And 2, it was most likely a Halloween prank because the bar down the street from my apartment had a Halloween party and it had just closed not too long before. Always trust your instincts, and remember, if you have any doubts about someone claiming to be a police officer, call 911 and confirm that they are in fact who they say they are. Dispatch and the officers who came tonight told me you will never get in trouble for making sure the person talking to you is actually an officer. This also applies to situations where it's nighttime and dark, so you can't really see for sure if it's a real cop car behind you or not. If you're seeing flashing lights behind you on a back road or dark area at night, put on your hazards. Call 911 first to make sure it's actually a police car. You won't get in trouble. Better safe than sorry. Well, that's all I have for y'all this evening. If you have a story of your own that you would like to share, you may do so by emailing it to me at holdmyflashlight@gmail.com or by posting in the subreddit r/holdmyflashlight, where you can also have discussions with other people who may have had similar experiences to your own. You can also follow me on Twitter at HMFstories. And if you like this podcast, and you're particularly interested in helping it grow, you can also follow the Hold My Flashlight Patreon. And for those of you who are listening to this on YouTube, just want to put it out there for you guys that you can also find Hold My Flashlight on most places where podcasts are found, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc. Alright, everyone. Good night.